All right, I'm back. So normally what you're supposed to do before, like if you open up a bank account, so I'm not gonna go too deep into regards to what type of account. You're really not supposed to be having no bank accounts in your personal name anyway, because that's another you've just given them power over you anyway. So but that's another topic. But as a bit as a when you initially open up your account, you have to give when you're filling out all that paperwork, you're not understanding the paperwork. You got to pay attention to the part to where how you're going to be transacting, what type of business or what type of monetary or currency will you be transacting in, right? And this is where you have to understand what money is, right? Money is not money, it's currency. So you have to figure out what type of currency will you be transacting in, because there's two types of currency. And how do you how, and I want everyone, if you have a Federal Reserve note in front of you, I want you to look at the face of this document, right? Because it's encoded. And if you don't understand the code and you're not reading it, you're not going to be able to decode it. But we're going to decode it today, right? When you look at this instrument, there's two ledgers. There's two sides of the ledger on that document, right in your face. There's a public side and there's a private side. So you got a choice on how you're transacting. Are you transacting in private money, which is can be taxed by the Federal Reserve? And then you got the public money, which is the US money, the Treasury, United States money, which is not taxable. That's the public money. It's not taxable. Which one are you operating under? Which one are you transacting in, right? They wouldn't know because that instrument that you're looking at, right, is it's in what they call bearer form. Bearer. That means whoever is holding it or in possession of it, right, has the power to demand payment on that document, that instrument. You see how powerful that is? Well, damn, if the bearer instrument works like that, what type of power do I have with the instrument that I control before I actually sign it and I create it, right? Because when you're writing a check, you're creating money, you're creating a currency. Your account is just a placeholder, it's a wallet. It's a wallet or a checking account, whatever you want to call it. It is a placeholder in which to transfer the numerical value to store it until you get ready to use it. So if you got checks, right, you're creating derivatives of that account via that check. So you're creating additional currency by writing that check. But you don't know what currency that you're using because you didn't give instructions. So when you open up the checking account, the non-interest bearing checking account, you're supposed to get, or well, it's supposed to be business. How you open up your business account, you need to give instructions or a letter, write a letter to be placed into the banking file, notarized, saying that you transact in legal, lawful money according to U.S. code. Uh, Wait a minute, hold on. Oh yeah, U.S. code per U.S. code section 12 section 411. That's what you're putting on your contract. That's what you're putting on your contract in a letterhead, notarized and placed into your banking file, right? And it's a big significance to this. Now when you get checks, you shouldn't be swiping your debit card. You can, if you didn't do that, you shouldn't be swiping your debit card. You should be utilizing your checks. When you utilize your checks, when you create your checks, you need to put this clause on your check under your name and your address. Redeem in legal lawful money per 12 U.S. Code Section 411 on all of your checks. That is what you call a conspicuous statement on your instrument that acts as notice of what your intentions are. You see? Because if you didn't give them instructions, they're going to automatically assume that you are conducting business in private currency. So IRS comes in, boom, get taxed. Why am I telling you to do that? Why am I sharing that with you? Because when the IRS tries to say that you owe taxes, guess what? You have a notarized copy of your contract with the bank. You have a voided copy of your check with this conspicuous statement and stuff like that because the IRS can't tax public money. Not my words. In the law, backed up by case law. You have to
So, Tan,
understand this stuff. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
my apologies, Tanen. I was gonna ask. So, basically, unknowingly, our signature to these documents have more power than we realize. At the time of negotiating for these different instruments, or let's say loans or credit applications, our signature is basically giving them the assumed power that we think they already have, when in all actuality, we have the power, because without us sitting down with that negotiable instrument and signing off on it, they don't have much room to work with it. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because you're remember, they don't have any control. They place the application, they place the so-called service that they're trying to give you, whether it be grants or whatever. You're dictating the jurisdiction of the document, and you're creating and dictating the status in which that instrument is going to be governed under, and the rules and how it will be handled. That's on you. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're just giving them on a document and they're waiting. They're like, "Ooh, wait, well, you got to do this. You got to do this." Remember, they bring in other third parties to usher you in, to kind of guide you into doing it the way they want you to do it, right? They call these people people that have licenses. Well, it says you got to do this, they got to do this. You see there, they say go get an attorney and see that. So an attorney's job is to guide you in the path to their jurisdiction in regards to that instrument. Everything on that instrument, you're controlling the input of it and how it's being handled. It all starts with that application, and then to the account creation process. Everything is taking place right. It's called what we're going to get into later. It's called that you're establishing the pre-market value of that instrument before it's delivered to the bank.
That's good information right there. And just a brief reset to everyone in the room that has a pink ticket, scroll up top, click Thinking Out Loud to join the house so you could get the notification for conversations like this, as well as other conversations that we have in the future. Right now, we are having an Urban Echo segment with the Consumer Cooperative Group. We do have the founder and CEO, Tannen Andrews, here to speak with us, as well as other members of the board and of the entire collective of consumer cooperatives. So far, this has been a very insightful and informative conversation. We are enjoying ourselves right now. So, do me a huge favor, look down at the bottom of your screen. Second icon from the left, it may be a square with an arrow on it, or it may be a compass symbol. Please click that link and then hit invite people and ping your followers in until you see the red bar up top. We definitely appreciate that social currency. That way we can get some new listeners in to also be a part of this informative space. I just want to give that quick reset as we continue. Now, Tanner, I did want to ask you this because I've heard this a few times before from others, and just want to pick your brain to see what you knew in regards to this. I was told at one point in time that when we file for these credit applications Let's say a person may be denied for a credit card or a loan and things of that nature. Is it true that if you are denied, that application is actually supposed to be sent back to you or something in that regards? Have you ever heard anything of that nature?
Yeah, so what so this, like I said, it goes back to what we're talking about, understanding contracts, and also how going back in the history, right? Because I'm 53. So you going back into the history, even with my mom and my parents and whatnot, right? The bank, when you used to write checks with the bank, right? And then they pay for service and whatnot, right? That check is then returned back to the bank, and then the bank sends you back the original check, the document to you. That means that shows you proof that the document and the instrument was paid, and the original document was returned, check was returned back to you. You see, so now this is going to support what I'm about to tell you about the applications. So when these particular laws, without us not going into this law, because this will be a long session, but just the different laws, how different things came in, electronic, the Signature Act, and all of this stuff, and then the word electronic signatures and stuff like that come in later on. Things change. So when you're filling out an application, either digitally or if you're filling it out physically, what happens is when you're filling out this document and you are applying for a credit, right? You're giving all of the elements of a negotiable instrument within there. The verbiage is in there. I promise to pay this back, right? What? Well, this is my desired credit amount. Say it's 10,000. So just say we'll use an example of $1 million worth of applications of credit that they're going to issue. 1 million, and say it's over the course of say let's say 100 people. Let's just say, right? So those applications, those applicants are based off of their credit, and we're going to get into the credit thing. Make sure you mark down this credit, what the credit bureaus are and what they're doing, right? The credit bureaus control the access of flow of credit, of utilizing their currency based on a credit system to control what you have access to by giving you a score, right? So just say 20% of that $1 million in credit gets granted to the actual applicants. So say that's 200,000. So 200,000 in credit. And 800,000, which would be 80 of the people, were denied that credit, right? Now, the application is never returned because the application is also stamped and also deposited into a checking account with your name on it because you authorized it because you didn't read the paperwork that the account was going to be established, right? So now they have the right to keep the document because now they created an account. So now they authorized the issue of $1 million worth of credit, and they actually got it because they deposited all 1,100,000 of those applications that equal out to $1 million. So they got $1 million in deposits, which are now bank reserves. And then they only had to issue out 200,000, which is 20% of it in actual credit. You see, so now what is that? Isn't that a isn't that a what's that? Isn't that a 20? What is that? 20? What is the ratio on that? Right? That is 20%. That is that's a 5-to-1 ratio. So they only had to issue out 20%, but they got 5 times the deposits and only had to issue out 20%. You see?
Wait, you mean to tell me so they're accredited one amount, but they're only held liable to issue out a different amount outside of that amount that they were accredited?
That's correct. Because deposits, remember, deposits never disappear. And you think they know them knowing what I just explained to you just a few minutes ago. about 5 minutes ago, right? Do you think you just sent them a document with your signature on it, whether it be physical or digital? That's an authorization. You gave them a blank. What did I say? Blank. You didn't give no instructions, right? You just gave them a blank instrument to do whatever they want with. So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of the way that it's supposed to work, because you know how it works. You know how it works because every time, and I'm gonna give you an example. When you get something in the mail, when you get somebody like a, say, a furniture store or whatever and stuff like that, and you get a check in the mail, or you think it's a check, you open it up, it's got all the elements of a check, right? But there's a special stamp on it that prevents you from taking it to the bank. Anybody know what that is?
No.
Is it the stamp that says
Not negotiable.
pre-approved?
It says
No.
not negotiable, right?
It says non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. I'd be mad when I get those.
That's what that is. You see, they're teaching you stuff, but you're not recognizing the play. Because they know where in hell they're gonna send you something out. You see what I'm saying? No, and then they give you instructions on there. This is a non-negotiable. It only can be used internally at the store. Instructions. They're very strategic in when they market to people and when they market to us, all right? Very strategic. And that's what we teach here.
Okay, okay, okay. I like that information. You kind of had me stuck at, at a loss of words when you say you gave them an authorization. I mean, authorize
You broke up. Okay.
them an authorization. I was like, I did. And then you
Yeah.
sent it off and you don't know what they do with it after you
You don't
send it
know what
off.
they,
And
yes, exactly. I do.
now
I
you
know. I know what they
now
do.
you start thinking about all of the things that's actually stated on that contract that you skipped. You may have skimmed over it, but didn't see anything too alarming to your own knowledge. And it's like, dang, I got
Hmm.
denied, but they're still able to utilize what I applied, hoping that I had access to. So that
Exactly.
that yeah,
Because
that was
what is your,
eye
what is
opening.
your focus in that application? You're trying to get what? Be honest. What are you trying to get?
Credit or a loan,
Money. Money. Or
Right,
what you
money.
think is money, right? So now, look at this. Look at this from this perception, right? Always remember this. If you're trying to get money, there must be a corresponding asset that produces it. So if you get the money, you've given up an asset that produces the money. What is that asset? That promissory note, that credit application. You've given up the asset for them to control the flow in which that money that's promised or obligated in there is to be collected. And if you switch the roles as the original creditor to do the debtor, now they have the power to collect from you. You see how they flipped it on you on through a contract? They flipped your role.
which goes back to the question that G. Billa asked in regards to them garnishing your wages and
Yes.
confiscating property and things of that nature if you don't
Yeah.
adhere to the contract at hand.
Yeah. He gave him permission to do that. He gave him permission to collect from his thing, to collect on the debt, because he surrendered and abandoned the asset, which is the instrument that had the instructions, right? But see, the problem is, right? This is the problem. You let them draft the document to make it unilateral to be enforced against you when you sign and deliver it to them by negotiation. Let that sink in for a minute. Let that sink in for a minute, man.
That's what I'm saying. This is wild, bro. Like it's like so basically once I sign that paper, I'm basically giving them the green light to do whatever they want to do with my signature, basically.
Yes, that's correct. Because you didn't give no instructions. So now let's move to the next element on that, right? On that check. Now let's look at the check, right? There's two things that you're gonna have to the next thing I'm about to share with you, and then I'm gonna want you to look at the next thing after that, right? So I want if you have a check, I want everybody to look at your check, and then I want you to take a magnifying glass, and then I want you to look at the signature line, and you'll see that it's not a signature line. It's words that says authorized signature. Repeat it. So anytime that you see the term authorized signature, it's in reference to a corporation. Because a corporation needs an authorized signature. Oh, let's go to your name. Your name is in all caps. Or they presume that you are an entity, because you classified yourself as that. You didn't, you let them assume that and you didn't correct it. So now it takes on a different form of which they are governing you by. Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, that's deep. And I'm glad you brought up entities again. Because I did want to circle back around that when we were talking about unincorporated, incorporated, the United
Hmm.
States basically doing business as a government under an incorporation. Um, how important is it to develop a C corp or S corp or LLC, things of that nature? Would you mind sharing with the room the different levels of incorporation as well as the benefits of it?
Yeah. So first, let's focus on uh what corporations are. Like you're saying, what are corporations? They're businesses, right? Uh, you have a corporation. They issue stock. You have LLCs. They issue units, membership units, right, which are not stock. And then you have different types of C corps. You got different type of corporation. You have what they call a C corp, and then you have an S corp. An S corp is only allowed no more than 100 shareholders. C corp is unlimited, right? And the best entity, all the entities have a purpose, right? And but I think everybody, the narrative has been getting mixed up, right? Because when people get new information, they think they know there's good information, they think it's good, and they run with it. And the next thing you know, they're teaching that information, and then they're making the situation worse. The top entity that you should be having is a corporation. Why? Because you can create stock. And then we'll go in why stock is important. Because it's part of the money creation process of what I just explained to you. Okay. Uh, Corporations should always act in the capacity of the original creditor in your ecosystem. The LLCs should all be throwaways. They should be your debtors inside of your entities. Those should be the relationships. Corporations should be the creditor. LLCs should be the debtors. They're the throwaway because they're passive. They're passive entities. And so what people do is they go out and say LLC this, LLC that, right? But they're endangering themselves financially, and they put themselves in a situation in which we just talked about, right? So everything that I just told you about structure yourself as an individual, you don't structure yourself as an individual like that. That's your structure that you do for your entities, because you are not supposed to have anything in your name. So the LLC should be owned, wholly owned by the C Corp, right? What is the difference between an individual and a corporation? What's the difference? When you're taxed at the individual level, you're taxed at your gross. IRS takes the money right off the top, and then you get to go pay your bills. Corporation, they get taxed on their net. That means they get to pay their bills first, and then whatever's left over, then they can be taxed. So why are you operating in your individual capacity? That would be my question. So the reason why I say it's dangerous when people say, "Oh, I'm gonna get an LLC and blah blah blah." Guess who's sitting behind the LLC? The individual. So any income that is
what about
what? Oh,
claiming
go
your
ahead. Go ahead.
exemption? What
Huh?
Hold
about claiming
on,
your
hold on,
exemption?
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let him finish his submission. We stated in the chat and we've also made announcements that we have a Telegram link that you can, leave your questions for the mods to get in line in queue so that it can be at an appropriate time. We're not going to do any interrupting, and we're not going to take any questions from the speakers directly at this time. The replays are on, so any questions that you may have that could have been answered already, you will be able to go back and listen to it. But at the same time, we're going to keep this space free flowing with no interruptions. Okay? You got it, Tanner.
Okay, so now, so when capital comes into the LLC, yeah, the LLC has a tax ID number. Well, you want it to be that debtor. You want it to be that debtor, right? So when it comes through, that cash flows through, it's passing through. That's why it's called a passive income. So now that LLC is going to issue what they call a K-1 schedule to the corporation. So that LLC is not taxed. So now or the corporation or to the individual. Let's get back to the individual aspect of it. So now that cash, that value, that cash flow is now passed to the individual. The individual now has to place that on its personal tax return on a Schedule C. And now it has to do its write-offs personally, right? To do whatever. But that's dangerous because now when you're doing that, it's going to put you in a certain tax bracket and whatnot. And whatever write-offs you get on that and stuff like that on your Schedule C, then it's deducted from your overall individual tax, which you should not be doing that, right? So let's place that back over to the corporation. Same scenario. Cash flow comes into the LLC. The LLC is also the one that needs to own whatever cash flow that's coming in its name. It should not be in your name. It should be in the entity's name at all times. That cash flow comes in through the LLC. K1 is then it's transferred to the corporation via the K1 schedule. K1 schedule, which is a tax form that is information return that is given to the LLC, and then that is what the LLC is able to show the IRS. Hey, K1 schedule, boo boo, whatever was given to the corporation. Corporation then files that, right? Uses that before it files their taxes. It pays all of its bills with that cash flow. And those bills could be loans that it gave, that it paid for the LLC on its behalf. Whatever's left, if any, determines what they're going to pay in taxes. This is why it shouldn't be you behind an LLC. So now, The next important thing to understand is your corporation set up right. What do I mean by that? Is it is it properly capitalized? Because you got a lot of people say, "Well, I got a corporation, I got this and blah blah blah, this and that," and they don't have their administrative set up. They don't own their entity. So let me explain what I mean by that, right? So corporations and LLCs are created via the Secretary of State of the state in which you reside. You fill out the applications to incorporate, they give that entity a charter. You utilize an incorporator. You don't incorporate the document, the entity in your name. You utilize a third party service to do that. It protects you from the wreck. Your name is not in the record. It's not in the record. Now, when you incorporate in the Secretary of State, that makes you or that other person the incorporator, not the owner of the not the owner of the corporation or the LLC, not the owner. And that's as far as where it stops with a lot of people. You have to capitalize this company. How do you do that? That means you have to authorize stock. The stock is the corporation's currency, just like the Federal Reserve notes are the currency of the Federal Reserve Corporation. Just like the Treasury bills are the currency of the United States Treasury Department. These things have to be authorized. So now, how do you own the stock that you're getting ready to authorize before they are uh, issued to you? How do you capitalize it? You can capitalize without money. You're utilizing your IP. IP is intellectual property. That is your currency. You can arbitrarily put a value after you create before you create after you create the purpose and identity of the entity in which how it's going to operate. You got to give it a brain. So you give it your IP currency. You arbitrarily place a value on the stock, the price per share. You arbitrarily put a value. Arbitrary. Do you know what arbitrary means? Make it up out of thin air on what you think it is based on what it's going to do. So you authorize X amount of shares. You put that arbitrary value on it. You exchange that through a contract because you are exchanging intellectual property, anything that's current or future property, intellectual that you come in that you introduce with that in exchange for that authorized stock. That is your first ledger entry in your organization, and people don't have that. Now your stock, you got the stock. Now you are the owner, the shareholder of that company. That's how that works. Your stock now has a par value of this, and this is the book value of this corporation's, the value of the corporation, and your value based on the shareholders. That's how it starts. That's how it starts. Now the corporation needs to own that LLC. Same process. Form that LLC, articles of association or whatever, right? It's going to issue units. Then that corporation is going to be assigned those units, 100 Say you authorize 10,000 units. That corporation is now going to own at par value whatever you arbitrarily state is going to own that par value, that's those units in par value over as the owner of that LLC. Makes that LLC the wholly owned subsidiary of your corporation. Now that value of those shares now go is your second bookkeeping entry on your ledger, corporate's ledger. And now your value from your stock just went up. This is what you call creating a pre-market value before you start to utilize your currency to raise the capital the same way what other corporations do. All right, so I'll land on that one. Go ahead.